Welcome. We'll get started shortly. Before we begin, here's how to earn continuing professional education credit for attending this session. There are no polling questions or attendance checks. Instead, you will demonstrate your knowledge by taking a brief multiple-choice quiz using the Earmark app. Visit earmark.app in your web browser. You can also download the mobile app by scanning the QR code on the screen. Log in, or if you're new, create your free account. Be sure to use a valid email address because that's where we'll send your course completion certificates. From the home screen, scroll down to find the course. You can also tap the magnifying glass icon to search for the course. Tap on the course artwork, then the Enroll button. On the Course tab, you'll find the recording and quiz questions. Complete the quiz to earn your CPE certificate. It takes us a few days to create the course on the app, so if you are attending this session live, please wait a few days. We'll email you a link to the course when it is ready. If you have questions or need help, email us at support@earmarkcpe.com. And now, on to the event.
Hey everyone.
Welcome in.
How you doing?
Nancy, you're the dancing accountant, but I was over here jamming to that intro music from Earmark.
I was just going to say how much I love that intro music. That was fantastic. I mean, like Earmark. Why are we surprised? Like it's David and Blake.
Right.
It's the cool kids. Totally.
They should call it Earworm.
That's good. If y'all don't already know Diamond, she's our resident pun expert. Fantastic. Well, thank you all for being here. Oh gosh, so many wonderful people in the comments. Shout it out. You know what we're going to do? We're going to share in the comments some horror stories because, oh my God.
We all have some horror stories around 1099s. I'm going to share one here shortly. Nancy is as well. But while we're waiting for everyone to trickle in, definitely jump in the comments here, share your own horror story, and let's commiserate over the pains of 1099s together.
Because can we all agree 1099s are the worst? Bring it. All right.
The worst.
Well, the worst. I'm going to start with my crazy, horrible. It's not even that crazy. It was just annoying. This happened a long time ago. Most of y'all are too young to remember when we used to have to print out the 1099s and stuff the envelopes and stick stamps on them and get these things postmarked by January 31st. I don't know if anybody in the chat is like, oh God, I remember those days. Well, I found out, this was many years ago, a few days before the deadline, because without something like Keeper to manage these projects, I couldn't see the status. My friend who was helping me, she's like, yeah, I'm having trouble getting W-9s from like these 100 people. And these clients, their books aren't up to date. So I didn't know what to do. So I just didn't review for them yet. And I'm like, what? It's like a few days before the deadline. So it's January 31st. We're at her place with her husband, my husband, and me frantically going through. This legit happened. Okay. Frantically going through and entering numbers into the software, printing them out on perforated paper and like folding and stuffing and stamping. I had to drive down to the main post office in Chicago right before midnight to get them postmarked on time. And I'm telling you, if I had Keeper in my life back then, none of that would have happened. It's what I still think of when, no matter how awful January is now, I'm like, well, I will never have to do that again. Now, I know, Chad, your story is like a little bit more serious than mine, but can we agree that that sucks?
Yeah, 100%. And some of the pains that you just described and the surprises that you described at the end of January, those hit me very early in January, where we waited until the end of the year so we could start making those year-to-date spend calculations to determine who needs a 1099. And 1 week into January, I realized, oh my gosh, we have so many vendors that we need to collect W-9s for in order to prepare these 1099s. And that just hit me like a wave of anxiety and stress, so much so that I started to feel the chest pains and I got really nervous for my physical health. And so the screenshot that we see on the screen here is actually a hotel discharge form, a hospital discharge form, where I actually went to the hospital because I was so afraid that I was having like a heart attack or something. thankfully a little less serious, just a panic attack, right? But yeah, the 1099 stressors are real, and
I am not
people shouldn't
laughing
have to
at
go to
your
10.
situation. I hope you know I'm not like that's horrible, but I'm just like, I know you're alive and I know it turned out okay, but oh my God.
Yeah, and no one should have to go to the hospital for 1099s. So really excited to share today some ways to make it a little
Diamond,
bit more
do
manageable.
you have, I mean, I'm hoping you don't have stories like that. Everybody has a story like that.
I have so many stories like that. I have so many stories like that. So much pain that I turned that pain into a website to be a resource to other accounting professionals, because friends don't let friends waste time on 1099s.
Amen.
That totally. All right, Chad.
Yeah,
what's on the
so
agenda?
we're going to go through a little bit today on how to better manage those 1099s throughout the year. Nancy and Diamond are our 1099 experts, so they're going to walk us through some of the fundamentals on 1099s and W-9s. Diamond's going to jump into the 1099 problems and how we can navigate some of the nuances around those. And then I'll take us away towards the end here with how Keeper and other tools can help to manage that process throughout the year. So that way you don't have to scramble at the end of the year, followed by some time for Q&A.
Sorry. Jump the gun on that one. I was just so excited to introduce myself. I had my trigger finger on the slide there. Hi, I'm Nancy McClelland, and I know a lot of you know me already because I am looking at this chat and I'm like, oh my God, it's all my friends. It's so good to see you. Thank you for being here. I am better known as the Dancing Accountant. That's the name of our company. I have had a hyperlocal firm here in Chicago for 23 years. I have an award-winning blog and an MSN column, and I run Ask a CPA, and I can see we've got a lot of members here today. Hello, y'all. Represent. Ask a CPA is a membership community for bookkeepers who want to level up their game and learn how to collaborate better with taxpayers and learn how to prepare tax-ready books, and they want a safe, non-judgmental space in which they can ask a CPA questions. So we meet twice a month and do lots of really awesome, fun things. And yes, I am a dancer. And that QR code there is to my contact page, which has links to all the socials. I would love to get to know you better.
And hey, y'all, I'm Diamond. Long name, if I'm in trouble, is Jennifer Diamond. I do carry the CPA affliction, like many of you. I founded 1099problems.io a few years back when I was in the thick of 1099 prep pain one January. I also have been improvising for the last dozen years on stage in front of live audiences. The challenge of public accounting just simply wasn't enough for me. So I wanted to try the next scariest thing, which was a mix of public speaking and no scripts. In my day job, I run Spire Consulting Services out of Portland, Oregon, and I do business coaching and fractional CFO work. But my pet project is 1099problems.io. And I'm so excited to be here with y'all today.
And I dropped that link in the chat. Somebody was asking for the link to your website. I dropped that in the chat along with a promo code that gives the first, I can't read what it says, but somebody, it's all in there in the chat. Yes. And chat.
Hey everyone, I know a lot of the names in the chat. Thank you for joining us. Some Keeper users, some not yet. My name is Chad. I'm an account executive here at Keeper. But before I joined the Keeper team, I was in the trenches of public accounting. So understand a lot of the pain points and the traumas that many of us have gone through or are still going through. So yeah, it's been a real privilege to be able to share Keeper with other accountants and help them to solve those pain points like Keeper did for me not too long ago. The QR code will take you to my LinkedIn page here. Connect with me there. We'd love to chat and stay in touch.
All right, we're going to get into some fundamentals. I know some of y'all may know some of these things, but you certainly won't know all of them. I know that nobody wants to get into the weeds completely on this, but I'm going to take you a little bit into the weeds, but not all of the way into the weeds. So first I want to highlight that since I don't have enough time here to go through every single possible 1099 that's out there, because there are over 20 of them, in the appendix and in chat, I will drop a link to my article for MSN called "When Do I Have to Issue a 1099 Form to Someone I Paid?" And a lot of bookkeeping buds who I can see are on the call as well. They help me every year get that article cleaner and add and change stuff. And it's a pretty comprehensive article. So if you do want to get into the weeds with all of the different forms, that's a good place to go. The one that we're going to talk about today is the NEC and a little bit the K, because they're kind of related. But I want to touch briefly on some of the others. Let's see. So as most of the people on this call probably know, up until a few years ago, we reported non-employee compensation in a box on the 1099 MISC. That's the second one on this slide. There are a lot of other boxes on that form. Royalties go in one box, rent in another, and there was one called non-employee compensation. So what happened a few years ago is the IRS realized the gig economy is just exploding. And the deadline for the MISC to get the info to the IRS wasn't until the end of February or March, depending on your filing method. And as you know, the deadline to get the stuff postmarked or sent out via secure link to vendors is January 31st. But all of these different forms have much later dates for this information getting to the IRS, right? The date to the recipient's not the same as the date to the IRS. So the IRS was like, oh my God, people in the gig economy, like freelancers and stuff, they were filing their tax returns and accidentally or on purpose, mostly accidentally, a lot of folks don't have good bookkeepers. They were omitting this non-employee compensation. So the IRS was like, we can't wait until halfway through tax season to get this intel. We need it sooner. So what they did is they split out just the non-employee compensation, which is what NEC stands for. They actually reused an old form from the 80s. I wasn't using it back then, guys, but they grabbed that and they put it back into service. And now the NEC is the bane of our existence. That doesn't mean we don't have to fill out MISC for rent, royalty, attorney settlements, or other 1099s like INT for interest or DIV for dividends or PATR for patronage. We might have to fill all of those out as well, but the bane of our existence because of its due date is the NEC. And that's why we're focusing on that today. Now, Chad, Keeper didn't used to help us with those other forms, but I heard a rumor that this season they will. Is that true?
That's right. That's right. So in addition to our default prepare 1099s report in Keeper that does handle 1099 NEC and miscellaneous, we are building custom 1099 reports to help identify those other vendors that hit those other 1099 thresholds. So
all right,
stay tuned.
So excited.
Couple weeks away.
I can't wait. Couple weeks away. Okay. All right. I'll try to wait. Somebody was asking if there's a handout. I know we do have the link to the slides that I think Madison's going to drop into the chat at some point. So, and the slides do have an appendix at the end with links to a lot of stuff we're talking about and answers to questions that we've gotten at the end of like other versions of this. So make sure you download those slides once that code, or not the code, the link ends up in the chat. All right, so W-9. We all know the W-9. It's on the screen there with a little sneak peek in front of it at how Keeper handles them. So our clients and vendors, they do not get this about the W-9. When we ask them for a W-9, we are not saying you are going to get a 1099. We are saying, we don't know. We don't know if there might be a 1099 or not. That has to be given to you. So as a result, because we don't know, we don't have enough information to make that decision, we're going to give you this W-9, and it is simply information collection. So I have been learning from Nicole Davis, there is no such thing as over communicating. Your clients will perform more communication rather than less. So the more that we can educate our clients to educate their vendors, or we can now through Keeper educate the vendors directly as well. I'll let Chad get into that later. The better off everyone is going to be. So if we can actually get our clients to require a W-9 from their vendors before they pay them, then we're not even going to have to get to the point in Keeper where we collect the W-9 from the vendor, because it's only once that payment's popping up in QuickBooks Online, which is syncing with Keeper, that we'll see, oh, hey, there's a new vendor. We should send a W-9 and identify whether or not we have to do something about that. So if we can educate our clients to send this out before paying the vendor, we are all going to be so much better off, because some things never change. I don't have to run to the post office at January 31st, but the amount of time it takes to collect a W-9 from a vendor that does not want to give it to you, that is something we had to deal with way back then when I was rushing to the post office at midnight. We're still dealing with it today. Again, I'm going to let Chad explain more later about how this works and how it can maybe even help you get new clients. So once you get that W-9, it is not your problem if they filled it out wrong or not. Having that in your file and your client having that in your file means that even if somebody lied to you on that W-9 or didn't know how to fill it out and did it wrong, it's not your problem. However, I have a wonderful colleague and bookkeeping buds named Question Telka who put together a video series on how to fill out a W-9. It's in the appendix. I'll drop it in chat when I get a second. That is another thing you can communicate to your clients. Give them this link and say, hey, you can send this video to your vendors. And if they're unsure about how to fill out that W-9, here you go. The more you can get the client to do ahead of time, they have the personal relationships with the vendors, right? You don't. So the more you can get them to do ahead of time, the better off we're all going to be. So I know y'all are already on my side here, but the books have to be up to date before you can even fully review for vendors. Whether you're using like our horrible old workaround method in QBO or your shiny new Keeper, which makes it so much easier. Either way, the books have to be up to date. And I get really annoyed. I know a lot of y'all in chat already know this. When I hear tax preparers talk about somebody being just a bookkeeper, y'all know how much I love the word just. Here's a great example of that. If you can get those books truly closed out in full each month and not wait until the end of the year, then you can review for vendors who might need a W-9 every month. This was a game changer for us even before we started using Keeper, converting this from an annual process of reviewing for who might need a W-9 to be filled out. Converting that from an annual process to a monthly one was huge for us. Now, the reports that we were using in QBO were horrible. We had to re-review the whole thing every month. There was no way to mark who we'd already reviewed and who we hadn't. There were a lot of problems with it. Our senior accountant did a side-by-side between those reports and Keeper was so much more accurate. Not just easier, it was so much more accurate. But it can be done even using QBO reports, but you need to do it on a monthly basis. This is my big ask of you. So, all right, next slide. Fundamentals here of the actual NEC. So say somebody fills out that W-9 and it turns out they are in fact required to be sent a 1099. Now's the part where we're like, okay, let's go into Keeper and mark that this person is in fact eligible for a 1099 or that they're not. And if you mark that they're not, you never have to see them again. All those corporations that over and over again would show up in our QuickBooks reports that we were running before using Keeper, we don't have to worry about them anymore, because once we mark them as not needing a 1099, that's it. All right, when to send Form 1099 NEC. I know y'all know the basic rules. If you paid a non-C corporation, a lot of people get confused about that. They think if you paid an individual. This is not the rule. It's if you pay a non-corporation, which means if it is a single member LLC, you get a 1099. Multi-member LLC, you get a 1099. I feel like I'm that Oprah meme. You get a 1099. You get a 1099. I love you, Diamond. Basically, if you aren't a corporation or haven't done a corporate election, right? So my company is a single member LLC, but we've elected S Corp status. So if you aren't a corporation or you haven't done a corporate election, then you get a 1099. If you're partnership, you get a 1099. There are lots of non-individuals that get 1099s. When we let clients DIY this process, they skip their people. They skip those people, they think it's individuals. We see errors over and over and over again. If you have a practice where the client is telling you who their 1099 vendors are, and you are issuing these 1099s, I guarantee you're missing some 1099 vendors. So this is something that should be a responsibility, in my opinion, that even though I don't want it because I hate 1099s, I care about my clients. So I want this responsibility to be on my shoulders because I and my amazing team, they're the ones who are really doing all this work. We know how to identify these vendors. There are lots of exceptions, such as if they're an attorney, even if they're a corporation, they get a 1099. That's a detail that's in the weeds, but it's a really important detail that we're going to know and our clients aren't. So a common question I get is if you accidentally send a 1099 to somebody who it turns out filled out their W-9 wrong and they're really incorporated, or I got one last year from a colleague that I work with. She's doing this for a client that we share. And I got a 1099. I was like, hey guys, check that W-9 on file. I have an S-Corp election. And it turns out the client had never given them their giant file of W-9s that I dutifully collected through the years. So that's okay. Just tell them to throw it away. If you issue a 1099 to a corporation, just throw it away. It won't matter. It's not a problem. There are a lot of rules and a lot of people who are going to need a 1099 that your client is not going to be able to identify. So I'll let Diamond go into the weeds on this one. We know that it's for services, not for products. If you pay a non-corporation for services, not products, and then that third one on this screen has an asterisk there that says via check, cash, ACH, Zelle, or wire transfer. Okay. Diamond's going to get deep into the weeds on this one because it's like, but not merchant services or electronic payments such as credit or debit cards. But what about personal Venmo or PayPal, friends and family, blah, 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 blah. Super long list of these. She's going to cover some of them. She's actually gone so far into the weeds on this that I am amazed she ever came back out. So I'm going to skip over that third point. The fourth point, at $600 or more in a calendar year, that's when you need to send it a 1099. So there is a point that I want to make here that I'm going to circle. I just wanted to spend a second on this. You or your clients may end up in a situation where some of the payments to contractors go through Gusto or some similar service where you're paying the contractors electronically through there and they're issuing a 1099 NEC. But other payments went through your regular company AP. It's okay. It's okay for them to get two 1099 NECs from the same issuer, as long as they don't double count the dollars. Okay. So very common question that I get. Let's see. Where is my next slide? When to file. What are the penalties? All the dates are on there, but there are a couple things I want to highlight in particular. These didn't used to be big penalties. They used to be really small. So people didn't really care too much if they got all the vendors or not. They didn't care too much if they hit the deadlines or not because the penalties were small. But the IRS through the years has just stepped them up and up and up each year. And now we're actually talking big money if this stuff doesn't get filed. Okay. So for the NEC, the due date to deliver to the recipient is January 31st. And that is the same due date to file with the IRS, which is really frustrating because they're not all going to be 100% accurate. Sometimes the books aren't going to be accurate. Sometimes you accidentally included something that shouldn't have been included because it was in the 1099K or it was in the 1099 that Gusto sent out. And the idea before was that the vendor had time to come back to you and say, this isn't correct. Can you please fix it? Well, with the NEC dates the way they are right now, it's the same due date with the IRS. So you actually have to file a corrected 1099 at that point, which is really easy to do, especially with the software we have. But even manually on a piece of paper, it's not hard to file a corrected one. All of the rest of the 1099s, basically, they give you until February 28th to file with the IRS, or if you're using an e-file method, which most of us are, March 31st. So you have a lot longer to file with the IRS for those other ones. And the reason for that is just to give time for those vendors to come back to you and say, actually, this wasn't correct. Can you please fix it before it gets filed with the IRS. Now, the penalties for 2025, each 1099, $60 up to 30 days late, $130 if it is 31 days late through August 1st, $330 after August 1st, or never. But honestly, I almost never see clients get these penalties. Where I see it is that last one, $660 for intentional disregard. If your client says, I don't want to issue a 1099 to that person for whatever reason, $660 per 1099. That's a lot of money. Okay. It is better to file late than not at all. I am also a tax preparer. And when we're preparing our clients' returns, the IRS over the course of the past few years has started adding that little box that I have at the bottom of the screen that says, did you or will you file a 1099 for all of the vendors that need it? Now, I cannot legally check that box or let that client file a return where they have checked the box if I know that they haven't. I can't do that. And so you're not doing your clients a service, and you're certainly not improving your relationship with that tax preparer if you know that the clients aren't including all of their vendors in the 1099s. But the important part here is that it doesn't say, did you file it on time? They don't care. If you, well, they care. I mean, they care, but they don't care, right? So I've had situations where you've got a client who didn't have their books together, and as a result, they went on extension for their income tax return, and they took forever and ever. And now we're looking at the September business return extension deadline. We're looking at the October sole proprietor extension deadline. And these people are just now getting their books together. And we're like, oh, look, you needed to send out those 1099s. We'll do it. We'll do it in September. We'll do it in October. We will issue those 1099s because it is the vendor's responsibility to report that income anyway. If they didn't report that income because they didn't get a 1099, then you should keep better records, vendor. Like, I don't feel sorry for you. You should have reported it anyway. So that's my opinion. The IRS is going to get that information, and they're going to compare it to the tax return under that Social Security number or EIN that was filed. And if that dollar amount or 1099 total is missing, if that income is missing on the return that the vendor filed, they're going to get a CP notice at some point. So that is why it's super important to protect your clients. You're not protecting their vendors. You're not protecting their vendors. You're protecting your clients. They want to be able to check that box saying, did you or will you? Yes, I know that by the time that this tax return gets filed, even if it's late, we will have filed the 1099s for that client. All right.
Nancy.
Yes.
Nancy, what is the risk? If you can go back one slide on that
Sure.
Checkbox for the tax return,
Mm-hmm.
What is the risk if we check that box? No, we didn't file the required 1099 forms.
So I've had to do that. I'm glad you asked that question. Nobody's ever asked me that question. Diamond's great, everyone. Thank you. So I have had to check that box quite a few times. I haven't seen anything happen yet. But I should point out that box is kind of new. They added it to the Schedule C, I don't know, 6 years ago, 8 years ago, a while back. They added it to the Schedule E just a few years back. I think the IRS is still figuring out how they're going to use that information. I think the important thing to remember is that they just got fully funded last year. And so what I think this is going to lead to is audits of the client. Now, I have seen the IRS audit clients, but not because of this. The audit client saying, we think you didn't file all your 1099s. It is much more common for the state to audit because the state is trying to find vendors that did not report this. And so they look at you and they say, did she file all of the 1099s? And if you didn't, then they start looking at all of the vendors you should have filed 1099s for, and then they go audit those vendors for unreported income. So that's what the risk is here. I haven't seen it happen yet, but I think that's because this box is newish and they didn't have a lot of funding when they started putting this on the returns.
Yeah, it It is definitely a request for an audit invitation for
It is.
sure. It's
I mean, you
it's as
don't
good as a
want to.
Calendly link, you know? That's what this
I know
is. This
that
is
this
a
is good as a
Calendly link.
Calendly link, but it is like, hello, everyone, right? But I can't legally check it otherwise. So I have checked this on some clients. I use it as a motivational for clients who are trying to protect a vendor to say, if you do this, this is what will happen. And then the IRS is looking at you, waving at them and inviting them.
Right. And
Not
all the states are getting copies of all those federal returns. So
They
they
are.
get to see what you answer on that box as well.
And those
And
audits are much
technically-
more common. Like I've seen
Oh,
quite
yeah.
a few of those. I'm guessing you.
I've seen under audit where someone did not issue 1099s. It was determined intentional disregard. And in addition to the penalties and the interest on top of those penalties, they went ahead and got those deductions that they took for paying those vendors reversed, and then had to pay penalties and interest on top of that extra taxable income.
Okay, I am going to add something here. I'm glad you said that. I'm going to add something. Again, this is a little bit in the weeds, but I do occasionally have a client who simply refuses for whatever reason. And I let them know I'm going to have to mark no on here. And they say, that's okay. I am comfortable with that risk. I'm doing this. And what we do is we actually move that expense into their draws or distributions. So at the very least, they're not going to have that additional penalty for having understated their tax liability because they've overstated deductions. So if you have to do this, make sure they know that your taxpayer is going to have to mark no. If you're a bookkeeper, you owe it to that tax preparer to let them know that they're going to have to mark no, right? Because there's skins on the line here too for preparer penalties. You want to have a good relationship with them and protect them as well. And, telling the client, we should, at the very least, if you truly refuse to do this, we need to move it to draws or distributions. Yes. All right. Next slide. So I just briefly want to touch on these. There are also penalties for filing incorrect 1099s. So what we talked about on the previous slide was not filing them or filing them late. This is if you file them, but they are not accurate, then, and the most common one that I see, and I bet a lot of y'all saw this in September, because that's when the notices usually go out. And I got a lot of people getting back in touch being like, what do I do? I got this notice. It's scary. They sent out a notice when the name and the tax identification number do not match. The IRS has a thing where they're like first few letters and last few digits. And if it doesn't match their computer, it spits out this automated notice saying these don't match. Part of the reason this happens is that a lot of us use DBAs, and what the name that the IRS is looking at is the first name on that EIN letter. So I'm Nancy McClelland, LLC, DBA, the dancing accountant. If the 1099 were to go to the dancing accountant, the name is not going to match my EIN. The other thing that we see a lot is that people are using their EIN, but they're filing as a sole proprietor, which is under your social security number. So your name as a human being is not necessarily going to match that EIN because the IRS is looking for you to use your social security number. Problem is, whole point of an EIN in situations like that is so that you don't have to share your social security number on public documents like this. So a lot of people are using the EIN anyway. They can't do anything to you except send out this scary notice. And then the issuer, our clients, are going to ask their vendors, hey, I got this notice saying that your name and your tax identification number don't match. Are these correct? And you say, yes, they're correct. Okay, they don't have to do anything. As long as that information is correct, they don't have to do anything. If you lied to them or made a mistake, then, if you lied to them, they have to begin backup withholding on any future payments to you. But if you made a mistake, you just get in touch with the IRS and say, oh, there was a mistake. You file a corrected 1099. And that's the end of the story, as long as that person is reporting that income. All right. Regulations, they are always changing. Although oddly enough, not this year. And so We've got for 2024, though, the IRS reduced the electronic filing threshold to 10 forms. Now, all that means is that if your clients are filing their own 1099s using paper, the red special ink that you still have to order the freebies from the IRS or buy them at Office Max or whatever. If you're doing that, if you are issuing 10 of these, you now have to e-file. So we don't really care about this as bookkeepers and accountants, right? Because we've been using Track 1099 or Tax 1099 or QuickBooks, or we've been filing these electronically for a really long time. But and we're not talking about delivering these to the vendors. It's okay if they get paper. We're talking about filing with the IRS, sending the copy of these that we used to have to do on paper, that thank goodness we don't have to do anymore. We don't care about this, but our clients should, because I have a lot of clients that want to DIY in order to save money. We know that when clients DIY, they're skipping vendors accidentally. We talked about that beforehand because they don't have the education that we have, and they're ordering the free forms from the IRS and they're filling them out by hand. They can't do that anymore if they have more than 10 forms. So I anticipate that you're going to get a lot of last minute calls from vendors that have never asked you to do it before, saying, oh no, I can't do this anymore. I have more than 10. And if it didn't happen last year, they're going to get a notice in the mail. So this year, they're really going to ask you, so keep that in mind. Now, that doesn't mean they can't still file their own 1099s if they have more than 10 forms. The IRS, in order to accommodate them, launched Iris, which is a new free online portal for businesses to do this. Bookkeepers and accountants cannot use this portal. It is individually for the business. They are the only ones who can use it. So if anyone's getting excited thinking they don't have to maintain their Track 1099 subscription, no. In 2025, there have not been any changes to 1099 NECs. There was a change for Ks, which we'll talk about later. But a lot of people are confused about this because the House passed something to increase the reporting threshold to 1,000 from 600, but the Senate voted it down. So no changes. Do it the same as you've been doing it. Diamond! This goes back to what I was saying earlier about how it was harder when we had to do these things on paper, but it was also so much easier because we didn't have all of these fintech companies going, here are all of these different ways you can pay people. Back then, pretty much everybody paid through AP. They just wrote checks. And we didn't have to deal with the zillions of different payment methods that we deal with today.
And to Chad's point in the chat, inflation versus the $600 threshold that never moves, we're just scooping up more little fish every year into the 1099.
I really do think that there should be a federal law that any tax rule that is ever made should be indexed to inflation, because there are some weird things in the code that are like, really? $25 per gift that you give to people? Like $25? I mean, like a Starbucks card for $25 will get you what? I'm sorry. I'm off topic.
In Vegas, maybe a cup of coffee and a gratuity.
I know, right?
Yes.
All right.
So there are so many 1099 problems that can get in the way of 1099 prep. I'm so curious to hear from the folks in the chat. What do you think is the number one mistake that people make when they are preparing 1099s? A bevy of options to choose from.
There are
so many. It's just a Rolodex of choices to pick from, and almost no wrong answers here. But I'm just curious what people think.
While y'all are putting this in there, I want to add something. Something fun happened yesterday.
Good.
Yeah, it wasn't that. It was something else. So I had this really wonderful meeting with my team. We had a happy hour where we were actually talking about other things in addition to 1099s that we can use Keeper to move to our monthly cadence instead of our annual cadence. And one of them, so everybody who works for my team, they run their own firm as well as they work on our team, right? And it was really wonderful because we can provide a lot of support to each other. And one of them was just dreading 1099s, and we decided we're going to have a 1099 party. Isn't that a great idea? We're all going to get on a Zoom and we're all going to do our 1099s together. And we all use Keeper and we all use Track 1099. And we're going to use Keeper's export to Track 1099. And I'm so excited about it. So I think everybody should do that. All right. What are the answers?
That sounds like a lot of fun.
It's going to be so much fun. Can you believe we're going to make 1099s fun?
1099s are so much fun. 1099 problems are terrible. I hate them.
All right.
They're the worst. Yeah. Let's, for the big reveal, what is the number one mistake? We've got some guesses in here. Social security number, wrong name for recipient, including materials, including credit card payments to vendors. These are great guesses. Wrong form, wrong box. Yeah, every day. Let's see. What is it, Nancy? What is the number one mistake people make when preparing 1099s? Just simply not filing a form when it is needed. Just not doing it because we don't know, because what we think we know for certain just ain't so, right? We think, oh, they're exempt, or oh, it's an individual who just didn't give me their W-9, so they're just not going to get a 1099 this year.
Or the lawyer, and they didn't remove the 600, like so many. Yeah.
Many things. So another pop quiz. I want to test your listening
What is this?
skills.
You're all about the tests.
I'm so curious. Lead with curiosity, like Ted Lasso says. I'm so curious to hear what people say. And Nancy just went over this 4 slides ago. Okay, so 4 slides ago. Which payment methods are always excluded when you're preparing Form 1099 NEC for non-employee compensation? So there are 4 choices on the screen. I want to see in the chat any combination of those numbers for which payment methods are excluded when preparing 1099.
So number 1 is all credit card and debit card transactions. Number 2 is all ACH transactions. Number 3, all Venmo and PayPal transactions. And number 4, all cash and check transactions. So which payment methods are always excluded? Always, 100% of the time. Well, aren't all of these supposed to be excluded, Diamond? Well, I just went over this. All of these
you just
are supposed to be
did
excluded, right?
You don't have the rule tattooed on your brain,
right?
Guesses. Most people said 1. Some people said 1 and 3. Some people said 3. It is a trick question.
Diamond.
It is a trick question. None of the above.
Oh my God.
None of the above are always excluded.
Come on.
I know.
You're telling me I just taught everybody the wrong rule.
Everybody has the wrong rule. If you Google,
that's why there's a big old asterisk on that one.
If you Google how to 1099s, most of the resources that you see will proudly tell you, exclude all credit cards, exclude all credit cards. You can exclude all credit cards.
Yeah.
It's just not
so. I got to know, I wasn't looking at the chat. Did anybody get this right? it looks like Lori knew it was a trick. Lori, well, at least one person knew it was a trick. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Whoops a daisy. So go back 1 slide. I just want to touch on this real quick.
That.
No worries. So not all credit card and debit card transactions, we'll get into that in a second. Not all Venmo and PayPal, you touched on that a little bit. The Venmo and PayPal transactions that are coded as business type transactions and not friends and family flavored transactions would be excluded. But you have to be able to discern the difference. It's not so easy to do. Not all ACH transactions are included. There are some exceptions to that as well. Most of them are reported on NEC, but some of them are excluded. And then all cash and check transactions would be reportable on NEC. So yeah, none of the above are excluded all the time. Yep. So when is Form 1099 not needed? If the number 1 mistake is not filing a form when it's needed, when is it not needed? So the Form 1099K came out in 2011. Okay. Since then, we have had all these fintech companies pop up, all these new payment services pop up. So look at the poor instructions for 1099s, right? You have this little section I pulled out of the 40 million page instruction booklet. So it says Form 1099K, payments made with a credit card or payment card and certain other types of payments are reported on Form 1099-K and therefore not subject to reporting on 1099. So when you read that as a human being with eyeballs and brains, we see exclude credit cards because that's the reasonable thing to do. But it says certain types of payments. And then it's got that little sentence at the end. See the separate instructions for Form 1099-K. Form 1099-K isn't our responsibility. It is filed by third-party payment networks. It's filed by credit card companies. It's filed by merchant service companies. So why would we have to read the 1099-K instructions?
I don't want to read the 1099-K instructions. Although I will point out that you can do a great service to your tax preparers if you take the 1099s that your client receives and adjust them for things that are balance sheet oriented, like gift card purchases, tips, sales tax, etc., the expenses to the merchant service company. Adjust all of those and make sure that your client is, in fact, in the revenue line on their profit and loss, that all of this is included. But that's the extent to which I want to interact with the 1099-K, Diamond.
Right? Yeah. No, I would not recommend reading the instructions. It is only 4 pages, but I do not recommend it. It is not fun. I read these instructions one day and it was like pulling a sweater or pulling a thread on a sweater. It just ended up unraveling the whole entire thing because the little print really takes it away for you.
Also, I want to mention something about that slide. The 1099-Ks used to be for if your client had $20,000 and 200 transactions, but starting this year, this season, it's going down to 5,000. That has not changed yet. And so you're going to see a lot more of your clients receiving these 1099-Ks. It doesn't help with the point that you're talking about, Diamond, because you don't know what's in it, unfortunately. But you are going to be seeing a lot more of them. So I just wanted to highlight that.
For sure.
Do you need the next slide?
Go ahead. Yeah.
All right.
So not all payments from a credit card are considered credit card payments. Okay. And so the trick here is that the instructions for 1099-K and the instructions for 1099-NEC predated all these new fintech companies. So I'll give you an example of when a credit card payment is not a credit card payment. We all know and love Melio, the real dealio, right? Melio famously lets you pay by credit card or debit card, regardless if your vendor accepts it, right? So even though that payment is coming from that client's credit card account, it is not being run as a credit card transaction by the vendor's system. They're not accepting that credit card payment. So it's not going over the payment rails.
You're saying that it's how the vendor receives the payment, not where it went through on your end. Is that how they're defining it?
That's part of it. Yes. So there are multiple definitions for who must file, right? So there are payment settlement entities, there are third-party settlement organizations, and the definitions for these and who qualifies for them is clear as mud. Mm-hmm. So it's tricky. Also,
all right, what about ACH?
We think generally ACH payments are reportable on Form 1099, right? But there are some examples where ACH payments would be put on Form 1099-K. So many of us in the accounting industry have heard of Ignition, right? For proposals and engagements.
Love them.
It accepts payments. It lets your clients pay by credit card or ACH. Those ACH payments are being run through the payment rails that are required to report on 1099-K. So Ignition is going to include all the ACH and all the credit card payments that are run through its payment rails because it meets the requirements for Form 1099-K.
So you have to look at the third-party technology you're using and ask them, hey, Ignition, hey, Bill.com, hey, Melio, hey, Anchor, hey, whomever, and say, how are you handling these payments? Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Yes, and not every one of them has it in their help documents or
All right.
their articles. So you have to go down to the terms of service and you have to look for certain key phrases that match the phrases in the 1099K instructions. I do not recommend it. It is the worst rabbit hole. Like you said, I don't know if I've ever actually come out. So I was
1099 should
frustrated.
not be this hard, Diamond.
It shouldn't be this hard. Why can't there just be one sheet that says yes or no, included, not included? This is a reportable payment method for 1099K, so it's excluded on Form 1099. Why can't we just have one piece of paper that tells us?
Chad, can you make some of this insanity stop, please?
I'm gonna try my best. But yeah, all of these bullet points that are showing up on this slide right now are contributors to the stress that you and I felt with our January horror stories around 1099s. And so, we have to find a better way to make this easier and manage it so we're not doing it all at the end of the year and scrambling. So if you want to go to the next slide here, and Keeper, as mentioned, has tools to help with this. So if we want to go to the next slide here, I'll talk through
I love that your Keeper
the
cow
process
has a little,
for
he's got a little cape on this one. That's very cute.
Yeah, he's a superhero when it comes to
He's a
1099s.
superhero cow.
So there's really 4 pieces of 1099 management, and becoming efficient in these 4 pieces is going to help you to stay on top of it throughout the year. Before I jump into what this actually looks like in Keeper, I think a good analogy for staying on top of 1099s all year long is a lot like learning how to play a guitar. If you commit to playing a guitar, like saying you're going to learn to play a guitar is not enough. That's not going to get it done. You've got to make that accessible.
You really burst in my bubble.
Take it out. Yeah. So take it out of the closet in the back room and put it in the living room where you're spending your time. You need it to be front and center. And the same thing is for 1099s. You can say, yeah, next year is going to be different with 1099s, but you really need to put that in front of your staff to make sure that they're on top of it all year long and make it as easy for them as possible and not have them need to do all the manual year-to-date spend calculations, running some if formulas out of Excel to try and figure out who hits that threshold. So Keeper does make this easier. And let's jump into that now with that first step of identifying eligible vendors. Because we integrate with QBO, we're able to identify all year long any of your clients' vendors that hit that $600 year-to-date spend threshold. And with statuses indicating yes, a 1099 is needed, no, or unknown, you're able to start to understand which vendors you have information for, which you're missing information for. And then that takes us to our next step. Once we've identified those vendors that may require a 1099 because they've hit those specific reporting thresholds, we can begin to request that information from either our client's vendor directly or from our client. To provide that W-9 so we can start to look at that W-9, understand whether or not they should get a 1099 based on the information included there. You're able to request that in the same place where you've identified those eligible vendors. Once we've requested those W-9s from our clients or our clients' vendors, you're able to actually see those W-9s on screen, reference them, update the information that you see based on that W-9, save it, and all of that information gets synced back with QBO or Xero, the 2 ledgers that Keeper integrates with. And once that information is back in the ledger, the next step is to actually pull that information out and plug it into the 1099 prep software that you're using, whether it's a track 1099 or a tax 1099. Some of the screenshots that we've shared so far of our 1099 report, with all that information in there, in Keeper, you're able to actually export that to CSV in formats recognized by the popular 1099 prep software. So taking all of those different places or all of those different steps of managing 1099s throughout the year and bringing them into one place front and center for your team and automating that process to identify those vendors, collect the information, update the information, and then eventually plug that into your 1099 prep software makes that a lot easier. rather than waiting until January, scrambling to collect that information and inevitably going to the hospital in my case.
I want to go back a slide to this part here with the request, because I mentioned earlier, I alluded to the fact that you can actually potentially get new clients because of this. You told me some pretty interesting stuff that you've heard on your end at Keeper that I'd love for you to share.
Yeah, so when you're requesting W-9s from a client's vendor directly, they're going to get an email that says, I'm Nancy, I'm with the Dancing Accountant, we do the books for such and such client. Here's a link to upload your W-9. That's going to take them to a branded landing page where they can either upload that W-9 or fill one out on screen, which is going to produce that signed PDF that you can maintain on file for your records. But on that branded landing page, there's an option to include a nice little link down there that says, we're open to taking new clients. If you need bookkeeping or accounting support, we're here. And that can link out to your website. And we actually have some data on this. We've seen that 1 in every 10 W-9 requests that go out to vendors does result in new clients. So that's been pretty exciting to share since we introduced that last year. Yeah.
Legit? That is amazing.
Legit.
Wow. Okay. I would not have expected that. Well, we've got a lot of people who are excited about learning more about Keeper. So I'm going to skip through a couple of these slides and come back to them because I want to make sure that everybody knows y'all are going to be doing a live app demo on December 3rd. Chad, are you the one that's going to be doing that with David and Blake, or are they doing it themselves? Do you know? Do you know anything about?
There's another team member. My colleague Andy is going to be leading it. Okay. But if anyone is interested in learning more about Keeper ahead of that demo, so they can start putting Keeper's Prepare 1099 report to work and other file review tools, I've dropped my Calendly link down in the chat here. Feel free to schedule some time, and I'd be happy to walk through it.
Okay, that's awesome. Well, we've got a few minutes for Q&A, and I know that we have behind the scenes have been collecting questions. Diamond, have you had a chance to look through those? Here's one for Chad. Rebecca Johnson wants to know, what is the trigger in Keeper? Does the vendor need an expense or bill to appear?
No, it does not. So it's looking at all year-to-date spend, excluding credit card spend by default. So even if those transactions end up on the balance sheet or the P&L, Keeper's pulling that into that year-to-date spend calculation. Because it's going to hit that threshold. Now, as Nancy and Diamond noted, there are a lot of exceptions to what gets reported and what isn't. Know that you are able to drill into the individual transactions and exclude certain ones that may meet one of those nuance compliance topics that Diamond and Nancy just highlighted. So you can exclude those from the reportable spend.
Well, I'm going to stick with you for a minute because Marjorie has a question. Does the info in Keeper for the vendors sync back into Xero?
It does. It does. Yep. So any changes you make in Keeper, including the vendor profile information or the contact profile information, as it is in Xero, that syncs back to Xero. That's
fantastic. I know it does with QBO, but I presume it works the same way. We occasionally end up with a situation where there is a problem with the sync when we enter some information in Keeper and it doesn't look like it's being accepted, where we then have to go into QBO and it'll sync the opposite direction. But 99.9% of the time that works seamlessly, and it's really obvious when it doesn't. So we know how to fix that.
Yeah, typically that's just a refresh issue and just making sure that you're refreshing on both ends to pull and push that data.
Yeah. Pam says, what about legal firms that are paying lawyers within the payout of the settlement check that's not actually being paid by the legal firm? Do they have to generate a 1099 for that payment out of the insurance settlement check? No. And the reason is that actually gets reported. The settlement to lawyers actually gets reported on the 1099 MISC, because you're not paying the lawyer for the services. If you were paying them directly, that would go on the 1099 NEC, and And even if they were a corporation, it would go on the 1099 NEC, but the settlements to lawyers actually go on 1099 MISC. There's a box for it, believe it or not. Common enough. Somebody asked, should a W-9 be requested each year? I don't. I have heard many people say it's good practice, but I have a hard enough time getting them once. So it's not a requirement. I will say it's not an IRS requirement. It might be a good best practice, especially if you're doing it for your own company and you know that there are changes in your vendors. That could be a good practice. Somebody wants to know, this is for Diamond, where can we go for more information on 1099K versus 1099 NEC? This wasn't long enough on the topic. I mean, we could do, honestly, like a 2-hour, but I don't think anybody would sign up for it.
I would call it welcome to my rabbit hole, a deep dive on 1099K, the madness. Yeah. So you can find out more information on the 1099K nuances with 1099 NEC and MISC on the website 1099problems.io.
That is Diamond's. It is a paid resource, but it is worth every penny. So let's see. We've got a little bit of info here on how you can connect with me. I'm going to drop that in the chat as well. I would recommend, if you have questions about getting into the weeds with the other kinds of 1099 forms, check out that MSN article, because like it really, really, really does a very good job of digging through all of them. Here is how to connect with Diamond. She was just talking about her 1099problems.io, which is just such an amazing resource. I get so much out of it because friends don't let friends, what is it?
Friends don't let friends waste time on 1099s.
And don't forget this live app demo that that Keeper is going to be doing with David and Blake from the Accounting Podcast. Everybody knows them. So thank you all so much for being here today. We really, really appreciate it. And I hope you got a lot out of it. And for those who are going to be watching this in the future, I'm sure there's going to be some way to download these slides. The people in chat got it. I'm sure Earmark will make sure that there's some way to download these slides. There are a lot. I'm just going to give you a little sneak peek of this appendix. Got all sorts of resources here. We've got a link to Hughes and Strong Consulting, who have helped me out so much with this. Diamond's link, and then a huge FAQ, including in that FAQ instructions for how to prepare the 1099s using Keeper's built-in 1099 report. They have an amazing help article on editing these for all of the weird in the weeds stuff that Diamond was talking about. So that's just a sneak peek of what you can get when you download these resources. Thank you all so much for being here today. Chad, Diamond?
Yes, thank you so much. And best of luck with everyone's 1099 season this year. Get a jump on those now. Don't go to the hospital. Not worth it. There's a better way.
There's a better way. We love you, Keeper.
Today's event has ended. To earn CPE, go to earmark.app or scan the QR code on the screen. Then log in or create your free account. Search for the course by tapping on the magnifying glass icon on the home screen and then entering the name of this event. It takes a few days to make the course, so if you're attending this event live, keep an eye out for an email letting you know when the course is available. Pass the quiz to earn your CPE, then tap the button to email yourself a certificate. Stay tuned for more events from Earmark. Thanks for joining us, and we hope to see you again soon.